In May of 1985, approximately 19,000 Rotarians flocked here to Kansas City for their annual convention. It was supposed to be like any other year, until the leadership made an announcement that would change the world. Rotary was declaring war on polio, a disease that in the 1980s left over 350,000 people paralyzed every single year, leaving with it entire communities that were utterly devastated. The Rotary leadership claimed that if they could raise $120 million, then they could fund a global vaccination effort to save countless lives. Immediately, skeptics started to make their voices heard. How could Rotary, a group best known for small-town service projects, possibly hope to raise that kind of money? It just didn't make sense. The critics were wrong. Dead wrong. Within 3 years, Rotary had raised over $247 million, more than double the original goal, and they used that money effectively. They sent volunteers to some of the world's most dangerous and remote regions to distribute critically needed vaccines, and what followed was extraordinary. By 1998, North and South America were declared polio-free. The Western Pacific followed in 2000. Europe in 2002, and Southeast Asia in 2014. It seemed inevitable. Rotary would be remembered as the organization that ended polio. And then, the unthinkable happened. In 2022, a case of polio was discovered in New York. Decades after the disease had been eradicated from the continent, polio has returned to North America. And this, sadly, isn't an isolated incident. Across Africa, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, outbreaks are actively on the rise. Polio has returned. But what of Rotary? Well, Rotary, the organization that spearheaded the fight against it for so long now, is suffering. You see, membership is declining, at least in the West. Fundraising efforts are suffering, and interest in the organization in general is withering. Rotary may not be able to keep up the fight against polio, because Rotary might not be able to keep up any fight for long. And that is the true issue at hand. This story is far larger than just polio. It's about the decline of America's civic groups and what their collapse means for all of us. At their height, America's civic groups, Rotary, Lions, Kiwanis, and many more, were pillars of the American social fabric. These groups were simple and yet powerful. They would meet frequently, often over meals, to discuss which projects they could take on that would have the biggest impact on their community. But what were these service projects? Well, it depended on their community. In a small town, for example, groups like this might organize a charity auction to raise scholarship funds for local students, or come together to assist an elderly couple in need. In larger cities, where resources were often more plentiful, they could take on massive initiatives, like providing meals for thousands who couldn't afford one. Whether they were helping children, supporting veterans, or organizing disaster relief efforts, these groups were the heartbeat of local causes, and they did all of this while still finding the time to raise funds for massive global initiatives such as the war on polio. But their impact went far beyond service projects. These groups were also among the best environments in the country for people to grow both personally and professionally. You see, it wasn't uncommon for someone in their 20s or early 30s to get elected into leadership roles within one of these groups. Roles that were anything but resume filler. Take, for example, a service chair position. With responsibilities ranging from organizing events to managing volunteers, it could feel like a part-time job. But this role, and so many others, were highly coveted, in part because of their impact, but also because of the skills that they taught. For the ambitious, leadership roles in these organizations were among the most accessible ways to get real-world experience and skills ranging from public speaking to logistics. Skills that were extremely valuable in someone's career. And that's one of the really awesome things about these groups and what made them so vital. They attracted the ambitious and united their self-interest with community interest, a unique blend that resulted in countless service projects that helped millions, but also one that helped improve the moral fiber of America's leaders. Why do I say that? Simple. For many members, the lessons learned at these groups went far beyond the meeting room. After all, these groups were about service, and over time, weekly meetings where problems were discovered, weekly meetings where solutions were found, and weekly meetings where it became clear that some people really just wanted to help others, well, those weekly meetings had an effect. And whether you joined for career advancement or not, over time, the non-stop emphasis on helping others would eventually affect just about anybody. And that made something truly special. Communities that were built on trust, mutual respect, and a shared vision of what's right. These groups didn't just strengthen individuals. They didn't just do service projects. They also strengthened the moral fabric of society. They fostered a belief that if you worked with others, that the future couldn't just be better, but it was inevitably going to be better, so long as everyone worked together. And that belief formulated in these meeting halls was contagious, and it affected countless people. But what happens when these pillars of community start to crumble? The short answer is nothing good. And these groups are doing more than just crumbling. They are dying. Rotary, for example, is losing over 10,000 members every single year. Kiwanis just had to close its original chapter after more than a century. And Lions Club, even they admit that membership is declining and they don't know how to fix it. But why is this happening? And what does it mean for us? Well, the why comes down to three main reasons. The first cause is a generational divide. Young people today have grown up in a hyper-connected, globalized society. And while these civic groups do incredibly important international work, Rotary's fight against polio is the perfect example, their real focus has always been on the small town, local, community level. And that is where the disconnect lies. For young people, the idea of community has shifted. Think about it. In the 1990s, if you were into a niche hobby, you might not know anyone who shared your passion. Today, however, if you're into something obscure, say collecting Pokemon cards, you can find countless online videos about it, online forums to discuss, and even real-world events centered around your passion. Today, many young people would identify their community as people who have that similar interest, even if they're spread across states or even countries. Which leads to the issue that groups that are focused on small town, neighborhood involvement suffer and feel increasingly irrelevant. The second issue is money. As I discussed in a recent video, the American dream has never been harder to achieve. For many people, the choice isn't about which new car to buy. It's about whether their 15-year-old sedan can make it through yet another winter. Rising cost of living, stagnant wages, and student debt have crippled younger generations, so the idea of paying $20 potentially every week on civic group dues can seem almost laughable. And sadly, it doesn't even stop there. Because these groups are often struggling for fundraising, they will turn to their members to ask for additional funds, and this will lead to constant requests for young members to give just a little bit extra. And for a younger generation that's struggling financially and is often cutting corners on groceries or even on medical expenses, this can be an absolute deal breaker. And the tragedy is, these are the same young people who would benefit the most from these groups, from the sense of purpose, the connections, and the professional development. And yet, the cost alone is often enough to prevent young people from even being willing to walk in the door. The third and simplest issue is time. In a world where having a stay-at-home partner is a luxury, most people are juggling work, errands, childcare, and everything else, which leaves little time for a weekly meeting, let alone enough time to volunteer on weekends or weeknights. In short, these groups are suffering for the exact opposite reasons that they once thrived. During the golden age of community involvement, personal interest and community interest were deeply intertwined. Today, they're worlds apart, and that's created a death spiral. Today, members are asked to do more and more, and there's simply less interest in being a member, which in turn means less people want to join as they see that membership becomes more and more of an obligation, which today means that if you go to a group meeting of this type, you're likely to see a sea of gray hair. And tragically, this status quo cannot last forever. With their decline having begun and rapid decline seeming inevitable, there remain only two questions. First, can these groups even survive? And second, is it worth the effort to try and keep them alive? To answer the first question, there is a path forward, albeit only one. These groups need active young members. But how can organizations comprised largely of baby boomers and Gen X hope to attract millennials and Gen Z? The answer, put simply, is to offer exactly what young people today are lacking: a sense of purpose and, ironically, a sense of community. While digital platforms may foster online communities, they can never replicate the sense of connection and belonging that real-world communities provide, and the numbers show it. Over the past 40 years, loneliness has doubled, and self-reported cases of purposelessness are also on the rise. Real-world community groups are a natural antidote to these challenges. However, these groups have to change if they want to attract the young people who are most likely to dedicate themselves to it and also the most likely to benefit from them. They must stop asking people for so much money and meeting at times that young people cannot meet. Addressing the issues of money, time, and generational gaps head on is essential if these groups hope to survive. Will it happen? I don't know. What I do know is this: the decline of these groups is a net negative for society. They do the quiet, thankless work that helps to hold our communities together and makes your hometown a better place to call home. The tragic reality is that we often don't realize how important or good something is until it's gone, and that is very likely to be the case with these groups. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. It goes a long way in helping the channel grow, and it helps me know that this content is the style that you like. I really appreciate you watching, and if you did enjoy this video, I think you'd like my video on Is the American Dream Still Achievable for People in their 20s? It hyperanalyzes why young people today feel like the system is, frankly, stacked against them. I hope to see you in that one. Thanks again for watching. Bye.